So as you all know, I've had a love-hate relationship with the Warcraft series for quite a while now, and since World of Warcraft gets worse and worse with each expansion, I fear that one of these days my hatred for the series will inevitably overtake the love I have for it. Nevertheless, I still continue to talk about this series, and for good reason. It used to be really good. Well, the story at least. Warcraft 3 may have been butchered by Blizzard, but it still remains the pinnacle of the series to this day. What made Warcraft 3 so great was how it had you experience the story from multiple perspectives. There were 4 campaigns in the original game, each represented by a certain race, and the expansion added 4 more campaigns with new characters for each of them, adding even more perspectives. Today I am going to be ranking each and every Warcraft 3 campaign from worst to best, and since I am going to mainly focus on the story here, there will be spoilers, though I guess it doesn't matter anyways since this game is pretty much in an unplayable state right now, so you might as well spoil the story for yourself anyways if you haven't already played the game. I won't be including the tutorial campaign, Exodus of the Horde, in this list, because it isn't as fleshed out as the other campaigns, so it wouldn't be fair to mention it. Anyways, without further ado, let's begin. Starting things off at number 8 we have Terror of the Tides, which is the very first campaign in the Frozen Throne. So what makes this campaign so terrible that it gets 8th place? Well, nothing really. It's just the least interesting of all the campaigns to me. I don't think any of the campaigns are particularly bad in Warcraft 3, heck, they're vastly superior to the shit stain that is World of Warcraft. Terror of the Tides starts off with an FMV featuring Illidan doing edgy shit, and summoning Naga, which seems cool and all, but the campaign itself has you playing a zealous warden named Maiev Shadowsong, who is on a mission to hunt down Illidan's Stormwitch. And that's about it. The issue with Terror of the Tides is that the plot follows the same formula for nearly every mission. Maiev tracks down Illidan, only for Illidan to get away, rinse and repeat. That's basically the entire campaign in a nutshell. Thankfully, the second half of the campaign picks up a little, and there's a bit of backstory explaining Gul'dan's fate in more detail early on. So it's not entirely terrible, I just think that the story dragged on a little bit too much with the pursuit of Illidan. Next up, at number 7, we have the Founding of Durotar. This is the Frozen Thrones Orc campaign, which is accessible from the start, and is completely optional. The campaign plays differently from all the other campaigns, as it is entirely an RPG made in an RTS. The Founding of Durotar has you playing as a half-orc, half-ogre named Rexxar, a veteran who participated in the First and Second Wars, who decided to abandon the Horde's barbaric ways and seek a life alone in the wilds. Because of this, Rexxar doesn't have any troops to command. Instead, he is able to summon animals to assist him in battle. Eventually, Rexxar encounters Thrall, and offers his services to the Horde as a mercenary, and you end up doing odd jobs for the people of Orgrimmar. As you can tell, the Founding of Durotar isn't really all that exciting of a campaign, and that's why it's ranked at number 7. The characters themselves aren't really too memorable for the most part. You have the Shadowhunter Rokan, the Blade Master Samuro, and Chen Stormstout, who is an anthropomorphic panda, the only one of his kind until Mists of Pandaria became a thing, but we don't talk about that expansion. Gameplay wise, the Founding of Durotar is without a doubt the easiest of the campaigns, as you never find yourself in a situation where you are overwhelmed, and the heroes you get are very powerful. Plus, if you die, you simply resurrect at the nearest resurrection stone, meaning that you cannot fail a mission unless you quit, or in the final mission's case, let Thrall's base get destroyed. What makes it better than Terror of the Tides is the fact that it does a great job at building up tensions between the Alliance and Horde. That, and the fact that the campaign feels more open-ended, as there are many side quests to do for item rewards that have nothing to do with the main story. At number 6 we have Path of the Damned. Now this one was a difficult choice, as unlike the previous 2 campaigns, this one has a lot more going for it, and has my favourite playable race, the Undead. The main highlight of Path of the Damned is the concept of playing the villain, and while that's great and all, the missions are somewhat hit or miss. Over the course of the story you'll learn more about the evils of the world and their purpose. Other than that, you are simply watching as Arthas continues down the path of madness that was laid out for him, and I mean literally laid out for him, as he pretty much does what he is told throughout. This campaign is essentially a learning curve for Arthas and the player. Tichondrius is the most interesting character introduced in Path of the Damned, as he essentially acts as both Arthas and the player's guide throughout the campaign, showing them how to effectively operate as an evil force so that they can succeed in serving their Zul. Or so they thought. This is what makes Tichondrius such a great character, the fact that he is so deceptive in his guidance. It just goes to show that even as a villain, one cannot simply let their guard down. Even bad guys are vulnerable to treachery, and Arthas is no exception. It really makes for a unique experience. What lets this campaign down, however, is not the story, rather the missions themselves. I absolutely hated the Quel'Thalas missions, and it's the reason why I have an undying hatred for Sylvanas in the first place. The player has to go through 3 missions, each involving a conflict between Arthas and Sylvanas. Something that could have been resolved in a single mission, but instead the game decided to pad it out just to annoy the player. Perhaps the point of this mission was to blind the player to Arthas' actions, but that doesn't change the fact that these missions get so tedious, especially with such little plot in between all 3 of them. Thankfully, once all 3 missions are over, the plot begins to pick up again, and honestly, the rest of the campaign is solid. At number 5 we have Eternity's End. Now, I pondered at putting this at number 6 originally, but considering the fact that it's the climax of the entire game, I couldn't bring myself to put it so far at the bottom. Sure, it has me playing as my least favourite race, but at least the story itself features all 4 races, even if you can't play as them all. Just about every major character is involved in this campaign, even if it's just a brief appearance. That's what makes Eternity's End number 5 and not number 6. The campaign picks up surprisingly fast as there is a strong sense of urgency throughout, which spares little time for those looking to invest their time into the backstory of these tree-hugging elves. Of course, there are bits and pieces of lore here and there, Illidan's characterization being arguably the most notable, as he is a stark contrast to the tree-hugging cardboard cutouts that make up the rest of the cast. It's quite refreshing when you get to play as him, even if it's only for one mission, as by the time you finally get to use him, you'll be sick of that tree-hugging twat Malfurion, and the end of his mission will make you hate Malfurion even more. Thankfully, it's not long after this mission that the final war takes place, a war to decide the fate of Azeroth itself, quite possibly one of the most important battles in the entire series. Twilight of the Gods is without a doubt the best mission in the entire series in my opinion, as while it may appear to be a simple survival mission, it's an intense mission throughout, especially for those who dared to play on hard difficulty, as you are forced to contend with overwhelming odds for the entirety of the mission. It's a battle of attrition, and that's what makes it exciting, and extremely relevant considering its ties to the story, as you are facing off against the Burning Legion itself, who are actually a huge threat in Warcraft 3. They're not the joke that they are portrayed to be in World of Warcraft, that's for sure. Twilight of the Gods will make you fear the Legion, and will show you what the Legion are capable of. You are nothing to the Legion. You cannot win this fight. All you can do is delay the inevitable. That's what makes this mission so great, and it's the biggest reason why I prefer Eternity's End over Path of the Damned. At number 4 we have the Scourge of Lordaeron, or what I like to call Warcraft 3 Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, because that's basically what it is. If you've seen that film, then you know the story of this campaign already, but I will argue that the Scourge of Lordaeron is a lot more fleshed out than Revenge of the Sith. While it may be difficult to get into at first, once it gets going, the story will hook you. Arthas' descent into madness is what makes the Scourge of Lordaeron the 4th best campaign in the entire game, as this is where it all starts. The first thing you will notice the moment you start playing the campaign is that Arthas is an insufferable goody two-shoes. He desperately wants to fight to protect his people. Uther recognises this and decides that the best way to encourage Arthas is to give him the authority to make his own decisions and manage the army. Unfortunately, however, Arthas becomes too comfortable in his position of authority and begins to question Uther's leadership after he is forced to contend with a horde of undead at Hearthglen all by himself. This all comes to a head during the culling mission, which is where we see a completely different side to Arthas, who insists on murdering an entire city's population to cleanse the plague. Uther refuses to partake in such an act of savagery, and Arthas uses his status as a noble in retaliation to Uther's defiance, by stripping Uther of his rights of command. After this, he charges into the city of Strathdom to slaughter the defenseless citizens in cold blood, despite his honourable intentions. This is where Arthas' psychotic nature becomes apparent. While he may appear to be a goody two-shoes on the surface, deep down he is a spoiled, naive, self-righteous prince with very little empathy for others. For all we know, he could merely see the protection of his people as a status symbol for the sake of his image as a prince, as opposed to genuinely caring about the common folk that he deludes himself with in order to make himself feel like he is a good person, even though he clearly isn't based on his actions. Throughout the campaign, Arthas's descent into madness gets worse and worse until he finally encounters the cursed sword Frostmourne. The end of the human campaign is one of the most powerful scenes in the entire game, as it shows an FMV of Arthas returning home to the capital city after a long journey, with crowds cheering for his return, and as he enters, a petal drops on his hand, which darkens after being touched by his thumb. This small detail is then followed up with Arthas staring up at the crowd with a sinister grin. If you didn't think he was evil up until now, the next scene makes it clear as Arthas walks into his father's throne room and stabs him to death, proclaiming himself as King of Lordaeron. I love that the story fools you with the facade of a goody two-shoes, making you believe in Arthas's intentions, but when you pay close attention to the missions and what you're actually doing in them, you can clearly see that Arthas is not as righteous as his facade portrays him. That's what makes the Scourge of Lordaeron so much better than Path of the Damned, as you were playing the villain the whole time. You just didn't know it until the end. At number 3 we have the invasion of Kalimdor, which is the most conventional and the best of the Orc campaigns. On the surface, this may not seem to be an eventful campaign, especially after the events of Path of the Damned, but there are a lot of things that happen here. The invasion of Kalimdor is exactly what it says. It's a story about Kalimdor, which was an unexplored continent at the time. It is here that you meet up with both the Tauren and the Night Elves for the very first time, fleshing out the Warcraft series lore beyond the Orcs, humans and undead. What makes this campaign so great in particular is not much the lead character Thrall, whose backstory has already been explained in a book preceding the game, rather the side character Grom Hellscream. At the start of the campaign, Grom Hellscream begins recklessly assaulting the humans, causing needless trouble for Thrall's men. Eventually Thrall gets sick of Grom Hellscream's disobedience and orders him to cut lumber at the borders of Ashenvale Forest, while Thrall goes to seek the Oracle. Unfortunately for Grom Hellscream, the forests he cuts down appear to be haunted, though despite this, Grom orders his people to continue cutting the lumber anyway. It is then revealed that the forest is occupied by the Night Elves, who see the Orcs as a threat for destroying their forests. Grom Hellscream engages against this new threat, but eventually encounters Cenarius, a demigod, who turns the tide against the Orc chieftain. During this fight, one of Hellscream's men speaks of a well containing powerful energy. Seeing no other choice, Grom Hellscream and his men depart for the well before Cenarius can attack again. Upon reaching the well, one of the grunts informs Grom Hellscream that the well is tainted with the Fel, and that it is forbidden for the Orcs to drink it. Grom Hellscream states that they must drink it, as they were meant to be destructive savages, despite what Thrall would say. With this new power, Grom and his men make quick work of Cenarius, but little did he know that he fell right into Manaroth's clutches and ends up becoming a slave to Manaroth, who planned to use the Orcs to defeat Cenarius and bring them back under his control to be used as pawns for the Burning Legion. Thrall, alongside Cairn and Jaina, who had all been unified by the Oracle named Medivh, are tasked with fighting back against Grom Hellscream's forces so they can free him from Manaroth's clutches. During the final mission, meteorites will periodically rain from the sky and spawn infernals. It is at this point that the game makes it clear to the player that the Burning Legion's invasion has started, leading up to the events of Eternity's End, which will be the climax of Reign of Chaos. I love this small touch as it adds a lot of tension to the fight and gives the impression that something big is coming. Some might call it a premonition of what's to come. After the mission, the player is treated to what is quite possibly the most heart-wrenching FMV cutscene in a video game ever, as Grom Hellscream and Thrall team up to engage against the leader of the Pit Lords, and the Orcs' former master, Manaroth. Thrall attempts to hit Manaroth with the Doomhammer, but it barely scratches his wing. Manaroth, on the other hand, easily brings the two Orcs to their knees, with a big swing that is so powerful it creates a fissure in the ground. While Thrall lies there incapacitated, Grom holds on to the last portion of energy he has. After a brief taunting from Manaroth, Grom screams and charges towards Manaroth, his axe smashing right through the Pit Lord's armoured shell into his skin, causing a massive explosion, killing Grom Hellscream in the process. Talk about a badass ending. Number 2 goes to Legacy of the Damned, the final campaign of Warcraft 3, and the end of the Warcraft series. Wait, what do you mean World of Warcraft exists? We don't talk about trash like that here. Anyways, Legacy of the Damned introduces the Dreadlord Insurgents, comprised of Balnazar, Deathrock, and Varamathras. The Dreadlord Insurgents are without a doubt the underdogs of the game, as they are completely oblivious to the events that occurred in Eternity's End, and are forced to contend with the Scourge, who rebelled against the Burning Legion. Unfortunately, the character you play as for the majority of this campaign is not the wily Dreadlords, as you once again have to play the role of Arthas, who is a level 10 Death Knight right from the get-go. Lovely. Your mission? Kill every single human being in existence. You heard me, you are going to commit mass genocide on the entire human race, and you cannot permit a single one of them to escape because their deaths are so desperately needed to appease Ner'zhul. Everyone must die, so get going and proceed to slaughter every single living thing in your path. If you thought No Russian was bad in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, you might want to skip this mission using the All Your Base Now Belong to Us cheat, as this mission is far worse. After playing through Arthas' wonderful genocidal killing spree, Arthas' power also begins to fade, bringing him back to level 1. I hope you enjoyed that max level death coil while it lasted. This is where things start getting interesting, as the Dreadlords plan to usurp Arthas' throne and take over Lordaeron, teaming up with Sylvanas to get shut of him once and for all. While the Dreadlords succeed in usurping Arthas, Sylvanas fails to defeat him, as Kel'Thuzad intervenes. This is where I get to the one and only downside of Legacy of the Damned, and the only reason why it isn't my number 1 pick. The fact that Sylvanas decides not to pursue Arthas to Northrend, despite being very close to killing him with her arrow. She instead decides to meddle in the Dreadlords' affairs, despite her apparent reluctance to do so. I swear Sylvanas' character makes absolutely no sense at this point in the game. Unfortunately for the poor Dreadlords insurgents, Varimathras betrays them and helps Sylvanas defeat and overthrow them. Sylvanas proclaims herself and her fellow dead people as Forsaken, and takes over Lordaeron as ruler because lemons, apparently. Maybe peanuts, I don't know. But she certainly isn't tracking Arthas down. Nope, that would make the story too good. And we can't open up the possibility for an epic war between Kel'Thuzad and the Dreadlords now, can we? Seriously, Blizzard, you fucked up big time here and missed a huge opportunity. You could have done so much with this campaign, and you fucked it up for the sake of having a pair of boobies on the throne of Lordaeron for fanboys to ogle at. Well done, you incompetent morons. Regardless, Arthas' story continues as he encounters Anub'arak on the shores of Northrend, who accompanies him for the remainder of his journey. It is at this point where Arthas' character has a noticeable change. Before setting off to Northrend, in his final words to Kel'Thuzad, he called him a good friend. This shows that Arthas finally recognizes the value of others, despite being an evil maniac that wishes to kill everyone. I love that even as a villain, Arthas is still able to develop as a character. Eventually, Arthas gets separated from Anub'arak in Ajnol Nerub, and during this point in the game, Arthas has no allies. He has to rely on his own caliber to escape the trap-filled dungeon so that he can reunite with Anub'arak. By this point, it is clear to the player that Arthas has grown a lot stronger as a character. All the hardship he had to go through at the beginning of this campaign has finally paid off, and because of that, he emerges from Ajnol Nerub in one piece. But before he can reach Icecrown, he is confronted by Illidan's Stormrage, and thus begins the final mission, which has Arthas and his Scourge fighting against Illidan and his forces for the final battle, to decide the fate of the Lich King. After emerging victorious, Arthas walks up to the Frozen Throne. As he approaches the throne, Arthas is haunted by the voices in his head, reminded of the evil deeds he committed as he walks closer and closer to Ner'zhul. It is at this point that Arthas finally realizes what he has done. Whether he feels guilt for his crimes or not is up for the player to decide. Regardless, there is no going back for Arthas. He has betrayed everyone who ever cared for him, save for Kel'Thuzad and Anub'arak, who served him devoutly. His fate is whatever lies at the top of the Frozen Throne. Arthas pulls out Frostmourne and shatters the Frozen Throne at Ner'zhul's command. He then picks up the Helm of Domination that was encased in the ice and places it on his head, taking his rightful place on the Frozen Throne as the Lich King. So in the end, Arthas got exactly what he wanted: authority and control over all. The silly thing is that if he waited patiently for it, he could have had it. He was the next in line to the throne after all. Whether you like him or not, you have to admit that despite his vile ways, Arthas rose to power the hard way. He earned his position on the Frozen Throne, and it was all because of his efforts, or should I say your efforts in this expansion. Well done, player. I hope you're pleased with yourself. Because of you, evil is now victorious. What? Wait a minute, evil wins? That can't be right. Everyone knows that the bad guys always have to lose at the end. Warcraft 3 proves otherwise with Legacy of the Damned. What an incredible campaign this was, but like I said, it's only number 2. My absolute favourite campaign in Warcraft 3 is Curse of the Blood Elves. And no, it's not because you play as a pointy-eared elf for the majority of the campaign, it's because we are introduced to humanity's greatest hero, Lord Othmar Garithos. This man has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to inhuman creatures, especially those vile elves. Garithos realises that elves are the true villains of the Warcraft series, because they ruined the entire lore. Just look at Sylvanas for example. She was an elf at first, then she became a banshee and killed the Dreadlords, only to commit even worse crimes later on in World of Warcraft. Luckily for us, we get to be ordered around by Garithos for a while, and he absolutely despises us for having pointy ears. But since Garithos is such a kind, benevolent gentleman, he sends the elves on a suicide mission against the undead armies, claiming that he has great respect for their abilities, so he knows that they will be the perfect fit for such a mission. Meanwhile, Garithos and his men are fighting heroically in the front lines against the Dreadlord's insurgents, but sadly we don't get to see that. Can somebody please make a custom campaign for this? I desperately want to play as both Garithos and Balnazar in a campaign against one another. Regardless, Kelphus decides the best approach is to ally with the vile, nefarious Naga, and you know they're nefarious because the Naga were once Night Elves. Unfortunately for Kelphas, Garithos finds out about his vile treachery and sentences him to a well-deserved execution. Of course, since Kelphas is a vile elf, he doesn't just sit there and wait to be executed. Instead, he chooses to escape from his imprisonment and murder countless humans. Fortunately, Garithos orders his men to destroy their only escape from the prison, a portal to Outland. Sadly though, you win and Kelphas escapes. Don't worry Garithos, we'll get him next time. Anyways, once Kelphas reaches the other side, he encounters a familiar face, Illidan Stormrage, who has been captured by the vile Night Elves and their leader, Maiev Shadowsong. So Kelphas and Lady Varsh play a game of Capture the Illidan with Maiev, and emerge victorious. It is then that Illidan explains that he is taking refuge in Outland to escape the wrath of the most badass Warcraft character ever, Kil'jaeden, who told him to destroy the Frozen Throne. Of course Illidan failed to do that thanks to Maiev, so he runs away, hoping that Kil'jaeden won't find him. Kael offers to join forces with him in exchange for a lifetime supply of magic. Kael is then tasked to close all the portals in Outland. Did I forget to mention how incredible Outland is? It's a barren planet with floating islands everywhere. Part of the reason I love this campaign so much is just how otherworldly Outland looks. It's really cool how the second half of the campaign takes place on another world, and on top of that, there's demons to kill, plenty of them. There's also a new character who joins you temporarily named Akama, who apparently had a sexual encounter with an orc many times. Apparently he fucked that orc for generations. How is he not tired after all that fucking? Regardless, Akama decides to help Illidan fight against Magtheridon so that Illidan can take over the Black Citadel and successfully hide from Kil'jaeden. Obviously the plan fails, because Kil'jaeden is a crafty motherfucker and isn't stupid enough to believe that Illidan wouldn't try hiding in a ruined Draenei temple on a broken world. Kil'jaeden gives Illidan a second chance to destroy the Lich King, but if he fails this time, he will face Kil'jaeden's eternal wrath. And if you read the ending to the Beyond the Dark Portal novel, you will know that Kil'jaeden takes great pleasure in tearing people's limbs off, putting them back together, and tearing them off again until he gets bored. After all, that's how he created the Lich King in the first place. Seriously, Kil'jaeden's rap sheet is enough to impress even Adolf Hitler himself. The guy's an evil genius, though I'm not sure he loves his job as much as the Dreadlords. By the way, did I tell you that the Dreadlords answer to Kil'jaeden? Yeah, that's why he's the best character in this entire series, and that's a fact. You can't deny it. It is 100% correct because some random person on the internet said so. Anyways, the story isn't the only reason why I put this at number 1. As great as it is to see Kil'jaeden, Outland, and two evil factions facing off against one another to determine the ultimate evil of Outland, the missions are quite varied in this, as you're not only creating units to destroy the enemy base, you're playing tower defense, capture the flag, Illidan, and protecting Illidan as he closes the portals. It's without a doubt the most fun part of the game if you ask me, and is the part I look forward to the most. I also like the idea of Illidan, Kelphas and Varsh as a ragtag team of outcasts, who are clearly evil, but are simultaneously the underdogs who are trying to create their own place in the Warcraft universe. So that is my best to worst of all the campaigns in Warcraft 3. Like I said, I love all of the campaigns in Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3 is an amazing game and is my favourite story. Sadly, I can't say the same about World of Warcraft. and sadly Warcraft 3 Reforged is a total disaster. But I hope you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on about the Warcraft series, well, particularly Warcraft 3, as I really do love Warcraft 3 as much as I hate Warcraft 3. And honestly, this series had so much potential, but it was ruined by World of Warcraft. And honestly, there will never be another Warcraft 3. There never will be. This game was one of a kind. There will never be another game like it. Ever. And that's what saddens me. Warcraft 3 is unique in so many ways. There's nothing that compares to it. And it has my favourite story in a video game. Despite the fact that the follow-up has my least favourite story in a video game. World of Warcraft. But ultimately, I like to remember the good old days. And that's why I decided to do this video, because I think by now, based on what you've seen of my channel, you're probably thinking that I think negatively about Warcraft 3. No, I love Warcraft 3. Just because I hate Sylvanas Windrunner and I hate World of Warcraft doesn't mean that I don't love Warcraft 3. If I hated Warcraft 3, I wouldn't be talking about it. I wouldn't be bringing it up on this channel. It's an amazing game that I absolutely adore, but I also despise it at the same time. Like I said, it's a love-hate relationship. And I know that a lot of people who watch this channel aren't fans of Warcraft, and that's okay. But if you did watch it and you aren't a fan of Warcraft, then thanks for taking the time to listen to me ramble on about it, because this is a story that I think more people need to at least experience for themselves, even if they can't play the game. And honestly, my advice to anyone who wants to experience Warcraft lore is to just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. I know it's not the same as actually experiencing the actual game, but unfortunately the game itself is such a hassle to pick up and play now, because you have to do so much shit just to gain access to it. You have to install the game, and then you have to depatch it to 1.27 if you want to actually play it on the disc, because that's the first patch that let you play it without the disc. But the problem is, all the patches afterwards automatically update it to Reforged, which is broken and doesn't work. I've tried it, people. So basically, it's very hard to actually play Warcraft 3 now. I mean, if you really want to, you can look for a disc copy of the game on eBay or Amazon and just pray that there's a CD key that comes with it. If you can find a brand new copy, then that's a bonus. But if you can't, then you're going to have to use the CD key generator or something, because that's the only way to play the original Warcraft 3 that I know of. If you can find a way of playing the original Warcraft 3 in any other way, then by all means do so, but don't buy Warcraft 3 Reforged, people. Please don't. We don't need Activision Blizzard making any more money. So, there you have it. That's my opinion on Warcraft 3 and all of its campaigns. So yeah, that's all I have to say. So I'll see you guys later.
I must feast on souls. I grow tired of waiting.
You are not welcome here. I am Sylvanas Windrunner, Ranger General of Silver Moon. I advise you to turn back now.
It is you who should turn back, Sylvanas. Death itself has come to your land.
Do your worst. The Elf Gate to the Inner Kingdom is protected.
Shut the fuck up!
At last.